The Greys either are or are controlling the Illuminati. The Illuminati still want this disaster to happen. Fewer people on the planet means they have more control.
Eat bugs, live in a pod, own nothing and be happy.
Exactly. And keep people terrified of overpopulation by controlling world leaders, and use the media to disseminate propaganda, all to create fear, sow hatred, and ideally lead us to nuclear war. There is another timeline split coming in 2030. One timeline shows humanity awakening. This timeline ushers in a new era of peace. Humanity learns telepathy, and all the lies we've been told are suddenly revealed. If you have questions about who killed JFK or what happened on 9/11, you'll know. Every deception will be exposed, like a cloud lifting from over our entire species. Or there's the other timeline, where there's a disaster. And if you're lucky enough to survive, your role will be one of servitude. You'll be enslaved by the powerful simply to survive. Right now, there's a secret war being fought. On one side, the P-52s and a few white hat operators in the military and the government steering us toward Timeline 1, the positive timeline. On the other side, the P-45s, the Illuminati and the world's elites, pushing us toward Timeline 2, the apocalypse. If you look for it, you can see them preparing. In all of history, there have never been more underground bunkers being built. It's said that underneath Denver Airport will be their new headquarters. This will be one of the many safe places around the world where those in power can wait out the coming storm.
We're not one of those people, are we?
We are not, and neither are you. If we end up on the wrong timeline, we're doomed. Timeline 1, peace, compassion, and kindness. Timeline 2, chaos, war, and hatred. Which path do you think we're on? The story of Project Looking Glass comes from 3 whistleblowers: Bob Lazar, Bill Wood, and Dan Burish. Most of today's story was from Dan, and it has everything. Time-traveling aliens fighting for the future of humanity. I mean, it's a ride. But is it true? Well, with stories like this, time travel to the future, you can't really debunk them, at least not fully. But we can look at the people telling the story. First off, this episode was difficult to write because a lot of the stories contradict each other. Are humans from Earth and we eventually leave and become P-whatevers? Or humans were brought here from somewhere else? There are contradictions. Dan Burish tells a wild story, and he tells it well, and with feeling. But he has his detractors. Before he was Dan Burish, he was Dan Crane. He says he worked at the underground S4 lab near Area 51. This place was made public by Bob Lazar. Lazar said anyone who believes this guy should be ashamed of themselves. He said he never met this knucklehead.
Knucklehead?
His words. Dan said that he worked with an alien and they became friends. He also said he met angels in the lab and spoke to them in Hebrew. He claimed to be in the military with the rank of captain, but there's no record of that. He said he got his PhD in 1990 from Stony Brook University in New York. When Stony Brook said they never heard of him, he said they covered up his records. It was discovered that during the time that he said he was working at the S4 lab, he was actually working as a parole officer in Las Vegas. There's documentation of this. When that was uncovered, he said that was his cover job, and he got his PhD by flying back and forth to New York on the weekends, and the government paid for all this. Stony Brook said this is ridiculous. His finances show he wasn't earning much money working at a top-secret lab. He said he wasn't paid in money, but he was taken care of.
What does that mean?
No idea. He wasn't that well taken care of. He filed for bankruptcy in 2002. His listed occupation was homemaker, and he had assets of about $300 plus one 1997 Suzuki that wasn't fully paid for. Now, none of this means he's lying, but when you tell a story like this, people are going to pay attention, and they're going to look into the person telling the story. As people looked into Dan, he went on the defensive over and over. He's been challenged by George Norrie to take a lie detector test. He won't. A lot of the investigation was done by George Knapp. George Knapp knows his way around a UFO story, and he doesn't buy this one.
What really pisses me off is when I get told what has or has not happened to me by these people. They have no right to open their mouth. I'm sorry for screaming at you.
It sounds like Dan is building off of Bob Lazar's story. He also sounds like he built on the story told by Bill Uhouse, who was the first to mention J-Rods. But Dan has added a lot of science fiction tropes. He's jammed so many details into his story that it reads like the syllabus for a conspiracy course. Illuminati, every kind of alien ever mentioned, Men in Black, bases on the moon, time travel, lizard people, and on and on. I've noticed that many of the people who tell these stories tend to pack in all this stuff. It makes it harder to believe. Bob Lazar doesn't weave an elaborate tale about lizard people. He talks about the projects he personally worked on. Now, you can believe his story or not, I find him one of the more believable whistleblowers. And the time travel stuff doesn't make sense. Dan says there are timelines that branch off, but the aliens come back in time to affect their future.
1.21 gigawatts.
Right. If time travel works like the movie Back to the Future, then there's only one timeline. But he says there are branching timelines in a multiverse. So which is it? Another reason to be skeptical is believers in this story say that the chronovisor is a looking glass device. That's a machine that allows you to see through time. It's allegedly kept in the Vatican secret archives. It was developed by Father Pellegrino Ernetti in the early 1950s. Father Ernetti even took pictures of Christ using the chronovisor. Now, I can't prove the chronovisor is fake, but I do know that the pictures were fake. These same believers also refer to the book by Chan Thomas, The Adam and Eve Story. The book describes a pole shift apocalypse. This was such a dangerous book that it was allegedly classified by the CIA, and only a small portion of the book has ever been seen. Well, I've covered the Adam and Eve story before. Spoiler alert, I debunk it. So if believers of the Project Looking Glass story are using debunked stories as their foundation, I'm already going in skeptical. On the other hand, it's interesting that Zeta Reticuli and Gliese came up. Zeta Reticuli is about 39 light years away, and the two stars are similar to ours. Astronomers are looking for exoplanets there because the system might be able to support life. But Zeta Reticuli was part of Betty Hill's abduction story, so it makes sense that a hoaxer would add that detail. But Gliese was an interesting choice. Gliese 581 is a dwarf star about 20 light years away, so relatively close. 3 exoplanets have been found there, and Gliese 581c is possibly in the habitable zone and could support life. At the time, it was called the most Earth-like of all known exoplanets. It was discovered in 2007, so maybe Dan heard about it in the news. But if he'd heard about Gliese from an alien, you'd think he'd know how to pronounce it. In 2008, a radio signal was sent to Gliese 581c. It's called a Message from Earth, or AMFE, and it contains 501 different messages. The signal will reach the planet in early 2029.
Just before the next timeline switch.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Whether you believe this specific story or not, I think you can feel that something is happening. I feel it. Dan's story might be far-fetched, but there's plenty of evidence that the CIA and other Black Ops programs have experimented with psychics, remote viewing, and even time travel. We know that they did this, so we have to stay diligent, just in case a timeline shift is coming. So pay close attention to the powerful elites. Which timeline are they steering us toward?
The future is not just happening. The future is built by us, by a powerful community as you here in this room.
Do they want us to have more freedom, more safety, and more unity? Or do the elites and the media who serve them want to remove our freedoms one by one? If we do as we're told, humanity will finally be united, live in peace and prosper.
Ha!
Well, that's what they say. Do you feel safer today than a few years ago? Do you feel more united with people? Is the Earth a peaceful place? 2030 is only a few years away, and it's coming fast. But we still have time. We still have a chance to steer humanity toward the positive timeline. The powerful don't want that to happen. They want us to hate each other and destroy each other. They want chaos and war, and ideally, a world war. And from the ashes and rubble of their war, they will build a new world. Their world, without us. Whether you believe the two timeline story or not, something is happening. The lines have been drawn, and it's time for you to pick a side.